We are talking the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. There is a lot going on. I have a lot of opinions, and I'm actually a little bit pissed at a journalist I normally really, really admire. Less pissed at him, but just pissed that he platformed a particular person. Not good. Let's get into it. Lindsay Clancy. So for those who are unaware, she is a mother from Massachusetts who is currently on trial for the first-degree M of her 3 children. And she does not argue that she didn't actually do the deed, but it is the defense is that it was postpartum psychosis that led to her actions. And here's the thing, I get snarky here. I get really sarcastic and snarky, and I will often make fun of people who have done horrible things. This is not that case. And if I am snarky, it will be at other people's expense, not at Lindsay's. This is not to say that there aren't horrible women out there and horrible mothers, but from everything I've seen so far, Lindsay doesn't fall under that category. She was an excellent mother. If anything, she was such a high achiever in every aspect of her life. She was a perfectionist, and that might have been a contributing factor, perhaps, toward landing in postpartum psychosis. This is the most tragic cases I've come across in a very long time. So this is Lindsay. She had 3 small children. I believe their ages like 5, 3, and like 8 months, something like that. 2 boys and a girl. I believe the girl was the oldest. Her name was Cora. Lindsay was a labor and delivery nurse, and her daughter was named after the first baby she helped deliver. This is the kind of woman she was. She was just an absolutely doting, loving mother. And after the birth of each of her children, she did not want to go back to work. She had anxiety about being away from her baby every time, and it just got worse with each child, which is also anxiety is another contributing factor toward postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis. She knew that she needed help. She sought help. She saw multiple doctors, had multiple prescriptions, and some people I've been seeing say that, oh, she was over medicated and medicine is what made her do these things. In trial so far, we've only had 1 day as of July 27th. This is the 28th as I'm recording. So far, it looks like she wasn't taking much medication. She was only prescribed 2 or 3 at a time, not the 13 that they list. Those were across time at different times. But it sounds like she might not have been taking that much of the medication. And perhaps, actually, ironically, maybe that was an issue, that if she had taken more of her medication more regularly, perhaps her brain chemistry would have been more in balance. We don't know. What we do know is that on the day of her children's deaths, that her husband, and people are saying that she planned all of this and that's why it's first degree, and she just didn't want to be a mother anymore, which is insane. She just actually built a snowman earlier that day and had outings with the kids and her husband, and it makes no sense for her to say, oh, I want to get out of this. So she had taken her daughter to her 5-year well check appointment, and at the same time that she had talked to the doctor about, apparently her daughter was self-conscious about using the bathroom at school, so she was getting backed up, and the doctor recommended a laxative. She researched children's laxatives and double checked to see if this nearby pharmacy had it, and it did. And then she thought, I'm kind of overwhelmed. Let's do takeout. She called in the takeout order, and people are making a big deal out of the fact that she picked a takeout place that was farther away than usual and not their usual takeout place, as if you don't want a variety sometimes. Also, it was 5 miles from their house. 5 miles. That's nothing. Like, I could easily, we've done takeout from 25 miles away. Like, come on, guys. Essentially, when her husband left to pick up the food and go to the pharmacy, then she claims that voices told her to take action, and she lost control of her body, and that she had to end her children's lives and then end her own. In fact, they're doing a civil lawsuit against some of the medical practitioners involved. In the civil suit, she says, I lost all control. My body started acting without any control on my part. I was just following commands. All action. This voice demanded action. That sounds like psychosis to me. Of course, a jury is going to have to decide that. And in Massachusetts, the jury gets to decide, was it psychosis? Was it the M? And if it's M, then what degree is that the jury will get to decide first degree, second degree, or whatever. What happened though, what she did to her children, I'll try not to be graphic here. They were found with exercise bands around them, their throats, and that took their lives. Now, I will also say that I saw one talking head saying how suffocation choking is one of the most personal ways to off someone, and it's because you're right, it takes a long time and you're right there in their face. And I would say yes, but she did it with exercise bands, which means she didn't have to be there the whole time. It wasn't her hands for 6 minutes per kid or however long it would take. She wrapped these things around their necks and then left. So it was a very quick thing. It wasn't a very interpersonal, long thing, for what that's worth. Then she went upstairs, she got a knife from the kitchen, went to their bedroom upstairs, and she cut her wrists and she cut her neck, and then she threw herself out the window, 2-story window. Her lawyer described it as like the same type. She shattered her thoracic vertebrae and part of her C-spine as well, and that it was the same type of injury that Christopher Reeve got when he fell from the horse. He was thrown from his horse and ended up being a paraplegic. She is now paralyzed. She's in a wheelchair. It doesn't look like it's quadriplegic the way it was with Christopher Reeve, but she is in a wheelchair, and I believe she's paralyzed from the waist down. Her husband found her. He came back from the errands. House is eerily quiet, and he finds her in the backyard moaning and just completely disoriented and blood. He calls 911. They arrive very, very quickly. And when he's still on the phone with 911, he asks her, well, where are the kids? And she is, again, just delirious and says, the basement. She didn't try to hide it. She said they're in the basement. He runs down to the basement, and then he finds the kids apparently still on 911 on the phone call, which is going to be played in court, but I believe the judge has said it's going to be kept within the court. It will not be live streamed. So we will not hear it. Thank goodness. I don't need to hear him discovering his children in that fashion. That's something I just do not need to see. But the opening statements, oh my goodness, that was absolutely a fascinating thing to see. This is her lawyer. His name is Kevin Reddington, and he is powerful, and I like him already. Actually, let's talk about the prosecution first. This is, let's see, her name, she's an assistant DA. Her name is Shanann Buckingham. The actual DA is present, the one putting out the charges, but she's the one doing most of the talking at this point. She's doing the actual prosecution. I think whoever wrote the opening statement for her, if she wrote it or someone else helped, it was not good, in my opinion, which is great for Lindsay. But this cases is not about women's mental health. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. The prosecution's theory at this point is that Lindsay, it was a first degree, that she absolutely planned this in advance, and she no longer wanted to be a mother, and she was such a control freak that she was going to take her children with her. And some people think that she faked this attempt, that she didn't actually want to die, and like the level of her injuries. In fact, the prosecution actually said that she had superficial injuries. I'll put up the picture that they showed of her in the hospital. I won't put up some of the more graphic ones. They showed like some of the cuts that she did and whatnot. But that does not look superficial to me. And the fact that she's in a wheelchair for life, that's not superficial. She'll need help getting dressed and using the bathroom and everything else for the rest of her life. That is non-superficial. The only argument and I'm trying to see both sides a little. I'm trying to see both sides, whether or not I agree. The only argument I can see, people saying that she faked it, and she also ground up some pills and took those as well. So she did 3 different things to try to make sure that cover her bases in a sense. And her husband just got there and found her before she would have passed if he didn't get there when he did. But the only argument I can see that even sort of fits is that they showed pictures of her wrists, and the cuts were going side to side, whereas that's not the direction you would be cutting if you know how the body would bleed better. And she is a nurse, so maybe she would know better. But if she's delusional and psychotic, she might not remember that. That's the only argument I've been able to come up with, that, she didn't mean to kill herself. But the pills, cutting her neck, flinging herself out the window. It wasn't like she kind of like just shimmied down. She like flung herself out and then landed on her head and neck. If you were to dive into a shallow area and get that kind of an injury, it's serious. opening statement for the prosecution was not a good one. Let's just put it that way, in my opinion. So Kevin Remington gets up and just shreds it. Says it absolutely is about mental health. And he also says, bless you, jury, you're going to be having to deal with some of the worst things, see some of the worst, most horrific things ever. And that is, thank you for taking on this enormous challenge, because we are going to rely on you to make these decisions. But he's not making no bones about it. This is a horrific, awful thing that happened. But it was also a tragedy and not something she planned. And she was sick. He brings up things like she was already telling people at the hospital that the voices told her to do this before she ever met him, before she ever talked to police, before any of these things. This is not a story she just made up at the last minute. He has these charts, the big posters, and I'm like, oh, dude, bring out a PowerPoint for the love. That would be so much better. But he had these posters showing all the different doctor's visits and medications she had been given, all the time she tried to see someone asking for help. She called the suicide crisis line, and they said, well, do you have a plan? No. Well, then we can't help you. She went to an ER. Please help me. And they're like, well, if you don't have a plan, you're not dangerous to someone. Oh, go home. She was actively looking, going, guys, I need help. Something is wrong. I need help. She was failed. She was failed by the system. Absolutely, in my opinion. From what we've been able to see so far, some people have wondered, like I've heard some people say, well, why did he bring this up? When at one point he mentioned that they didn't have a huge house. It was a modest home that she jumped out of the second-story window. And people are saying, well, why even bring that up? That's weird. This is why I think this is in one element of showing that they weren't just loaded with money and she felt pressure to go back to work even part-time. That her maternity leave was ending. His paternity leave had ended, but he was working from home and she was just anxious about going back to work and didn't want to. So I think, and he said that they had set some money aside so that she could stay home a little longer if she wanted to, but there was nothing about staying home permanently. And I imagine she might have been conflicted in that she loved being a labor and delivery nurse, didn't want to quit her job entirely, but being away from her babies, she actually told her husband it felt unnatural, that she didn't want to be away. And so I think the fact that whether they needed her income or she felt pressured that they needed her income, that may have been an element to this whole thing. So mentioning that the house was a modest home, I think that's why Reddington made that point. This is the judge. His name is William Sullivan. And so far, I like him. I can be very picky about judges. And so far, the way he spoke to the jury and kind of help them understand, explained how things work in the process and what their burden will be and how things are going to work out and how he handles the courtroom and what the objections will be like. And he kind of walked them through things that people watch trials, this stuff. But if you've never been on a jury and this is your first time in a courtroom, he seemed like a very loving, caring, I'm here to make sure that the playing field is even, that this is a fair trial. I'm not taking sides. Let me know if you have any concerns. Here's what to expect, and so on. He seems to know what he's doing, and so far, his calls have been good, in my opinion. After we had the two opening statements, we had one witness, and he was not even finished. And this is a witness that will be for both the prosecution and the defense. This is her husband, Patrick Clancy. He has since divorced her and recently, I think in the last year, remarried, which the prosecution made a point of bringing up very early on, which whatever. Everything he said helped the defense, in my opinion. He's very clear that they tried to do all the right things, that he was checking in with her. She came to him and said, I'm having thoughts. And he said, do you have a plan? And he was checking in with her regularly to see, how are you feeling? Are those thoughts still here? Do you have a plan? What are we doing? But he was checking in with her all the time. And she was sharing with him her concerns. And they were doing all the right things. They were going to the doctors. In fact, there was a point where he said, let's not do telehealth anymore. Let's do in-person visits because that will give us more time, and face-to-face, maybe they'll be able to figure something out more. He wanted to be involved. He was involved. He was an involved parent. There's just so much. A couple of fascinating things. We talk about how her psychosis and her condition worsened. Something that really jumped out at me is the first real signs of decline were that she could not sleep. Insomnia. She would be up for 48 hours straight. That is like red flag all over. That's one of the first big warning signs of impending psychosis. From what I understand, we're not entirely sure if it's like a cause or does it cause a psychosis, or is it just like the first sign that it's coming? or a bit of both. But not being able to sleep is so common when it comes to postpartum psychosis. That is like the first massive red flag. She couldn't sleep. And in fact, one of the sad things is that they showed, Kevin Reddington did in his opening, her nightstand. After the way the police found it, there is a bloody knife on the nightstand from when she cut herself. And then next to it, there's a little cup where she had crushed the pills and drank them down. And it says, because kids. And then there was several, like 3 little bottles, and they were sleep aids. One was like a pillow spray to help you sleep. And then there were other sleep aids. She was desperately trying to sleep and get the rest that she needed for her brain and her body, and she didn't get it. And everything Patrick, her now ex-husband, said was only, it helped her, in my opinion. It helped the defense. They showed that they were trying everything that they knew, that the doctors were failing them, that she was an amazing mother. One thing that the prosecution, and in the Massachusetts, they instead of calling themselves a state, they call themselves Commonwealth, so it's the Commonwealth/prosecution, that they kept asking questions about, like, well, earlier that day she was doing this or that, she was building a snowman. They went to a water park recently, and there's some video from the water park. You show her a week before, or whatever it was, a couple weeks before, dinner with some family, and she was able to have a conversation and eat and help take care of the kids. So even the day of, like, there are moments of lucidity even within psychosis. It ebbs and it flows. And you can also, even in the midst of psychosis, you can function. You can do things. Like the prosecution even said things like, oh, they showed it to a museum and she manipulated knobs and buttons. Like, do you think someone in psychosis is like a zombie and can't push buttons? Like, what are you talking about? Put someone in psychosis because psychosis can drive a car. What are you even talking about? Oh, the person I am mad at would be Nate Eaton. More the man he had on the show recently was Dr. Joseph Witt-Doerring, I think is I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. This so-called psychiatrist, as I'm going to call him, I really feel like East Idaho News / Courtroom Insider just did not vet him. This is my opinion. My guess, he approached them and said, hey, I would love to give them my opinion on the Clancy case and medication, and I'm a psychiatrist. And they said, sure, great. And that was probably the end of the vetting. And that's the problem, because it was very clear that he had an agenda, and his agenda was medication sucks, and come to my clinic and I will help you get off medication, and you should treat psychiatric disorders entirely with lifestyle. No, medication saves lives. Medication has potential for side effects and some dangerous ones, but those are extremely rare. Most side effects from medication are worth what they're helping with. The trade-off is worth it. Lindsay Clancy herself was eating well. In fact, her takeout order was like some healthy protein bowl thing. Like, it was like Mediterranean something or other. It was a healthy thing. It wasn't like she was ordering French fries. She was running regularly. She just run a 5K. She was exercising. She was eating well. She was doing the lifestyle things. That's often not enough. If you have the blues, not full-blown depression even, but just the blues, those things can pull you right out of it. If you have full-on depression and this is genetic in my family, and I've been dealing with depression most of my life, those things are tools in your toolbox. So should I exercise? Yes. Should I get my vitamin D? Should I make sure I get some actual sun? Should I make sure I'm drinking enough water and getting enough sleep and all of those other lifestyle things? Yes. But even all of those things put together are not going to pull me out of it. They will support me, but I also need medication. And that's not a weakness, and that's not a failing. It's just the reality of my brain chemistry that I inherited. And many other people. So I have a dear friend. He's a fellow writer. His name is Robison Wells. He's a New York Times bestseller. We were in the same critique group for like 14 years, and I watched him spiral into mental illness back in the day. Initially, it was like a panic disorder, OCD, depression thing, and eventually, they know now that it was the early signs of schizophrenia. And his schizophrenia reached the point that he could not hold down a job, that it was bad. It was very bad. His delusions, his hallucinations, There's a lot of trial and error as far as medications and what would work, what doesn't. There's like a 4-year gap where he just doesn't remember much of anything because of the medications he was on. But now he's on medications. They found the right ones that work for him and his brain chemistry. And he is living a productive life. He and his wife now have their own house. They are raising their children. He can hold down a job. Everything is good. And yet people tell him that he's taking toxic poisons and he shouldn't be taking medication. He goes, you guys, are you kidding me? Like, weight gain is one of the side effects of almost all of his meds. And he's like, you know what? If I can still function in society and not have my delusions and my hallucinations, I'll take some extra weight. One of his medications makes him slur his words a little bit in the morning because it makes him really drowsy at night. And it takes a couple of hours in the morning to fully wake up from it. He's like, I'm okay if I slur a little bit in the morning. I'm willing to have that side effect. If that means he can be a functioning father and husband and member of society and just a decent, and all that. So I'm a fan of medication. It saves lives. Are there side effects? Yes. Are there risks? Of course. But they are so minuscule that I really hope that anyone who is afraid that they might hurt their children, like Lindsay Clancy did, won't avoid medication because of that fear. Because chances are medication would help. And if you have a team around you supporting you, then you can hopefully avoid things. And hopefully you'll have a team that doesn't fail you like Lindsay's did. Because her husband was doing the right thing. She was doing the right thing. And the team failed. The medical system failed. And again, there's a civil lawsuit going forward. And I imagine that they will get a lot of money out of it because there are a lot of providers that failed her, in my opinion. There is no court on Tuesday, the 28th of July. Court will resume on the 29th. In the meantime, I did an interview with my niece-in-law. Her name is Meg, and she herself has postpartum psychosis. And now she is an advocate, and she has a podcast. And so I will be sharing that interview soon. Her podcast is called Mom Breaks, and it is fascinating and heartbreaking and illuminating. She talks about her experience. She interviewed her husband about his experience on the other side of it. She interviews a lot of survivors of postpartum psychosis from across the globe. She interviews experts in the field. And so, whether they're scientists, doctors, and they can give their insight and feedback. And she has a whole bunch of resources for anyone who might be struggling with postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis on her website, mombreakspodcast.com. So keep an eye out for that interview. It is coming soon. And in the meantime, I am thinking of poor Lindsay and her family, her poor little children. And way to go to Patrick for standing by her in court. At this point, if I'm going to be snarky toward anyone, I might be against Assistant DA Hutchison. We'll see. Because she's starting to piss me off with some of her statements about Lindsay. And so far, Reddington and Patrick and Judge, thumbs up so far from me. So what do you think? Let me know. We'll see you next time.